Greetings. My name is Christina Theodoraki. I'm editor of Small Business Economics, an entrepreneurship journal, and I have the great honor to interview today Daniel Bennett, who is assistant professor at the University of Louisville. Welcome, Daniel, and thank you very much for joining us in this interview series.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Christina, to talk about my research. Small Business Economics is one of my favorite journals. I greatly admire the editorial team, and you're doing a tremendous job of publishing high quality, important research on entrepreneurship. And it's my great honor to publish my work alongside giants such as David Adresh and Zoltan Ax and yourself. And I also think that this is a great initiative, doing these short interviews to provide more insights on some of the articles. And I'm happy to participate in this new feature. So thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And we are very glad to have you here and have these inspiring topics to talk today about your paper. So Daniel is going to give us more insight about his article published in Small Business Economics in June 2021, entitled Local Institutional Heterogeneity of Firm Dynamism, Decomposing the Metropolitan Economic Freedom Index. So starting my first question, could you please tell us briefly what is your article about?
Yeah, so economic freedom is a multidimensional concept that's been previously linked to enabling more entrepreneurship. The main idea of the article is to take a more granular look at how the institutions and policies that are consistent with these principles of economic freedom influence entrepreneurship at the local level. I do this by utilizing Dean Stansel's recently developed Metropolitan Area Economic Freedom Index into its 9 underlying components in order to examine how each may differentially impact entrepreneurial dynamics at the local level. And this allows me to examine a sample of nearly 300 US cities over a nearly 40-year period to provide new valuable insights in how different aspects of economic freedom at the local level may differentially contribute to facilitating new venture creation, as well as maybe facilitating firm entry, which is another area that this literature, which is in a nascent stage, has not really given a whole lot of attention to. So that's kind of the main idea from the paper, and I'm happy to talk more about it.
Great. A very important topic also that a very important question that comes often is, why is your article important, and what do we learn from your article that we didn't know before? Actually, the main question is, how did you get the idea of this research?
Yeah, so there's a large body of literature in economics and political science dealing with how economic freedom influences a whole range of socioeconomic outcomes that we care about. There's a huge volume of papers looking at economic freedom as a driver of economic growth and long-run economic development. I've even written some articles in that space as well, and I encourage readers to look at some of my previous work on Google Scholar. So there's kind of this large body of literature linking economic freedom to a whole host of important outcomes that we kind of care about, but entrepreneurship scholars have just kind of relatively recently starting including economic freedom in their models and empirical analysis. And so the volume of literature is actually relatively small at the moment. And while these studies provide important, compelling insights, most of them are kind of based on cross-national analyses, and that gives us, good means to compare across countries. But we know that entrepreneurship happens at the regional level. I mean, even within a country like the U.S. or the U.K. or Germany, there's tremendous differences in kind of rates of startup and entrepreneurial hotspots within countries. And we also know that institutions and policies vary within countries. And so, there's an important gap in the literature that we, just need to kind of take a more granular look at how these processes are playing out at the local level, within countries. And also kind of like, instead of taking all the all these institutional factors and then putting them into one kind of index and calling that, economic freedom, kind of trying to disaggregate that to see, okay, well, what sort of policy levers can be, kind of pulled by local policymakers if they want to encourage more startups, or if they want to, enable firms to survive for longer. And so we just don't really have good answer on that yet. And so that's the main impetus behind the study is really to kind of narrow in at the local level, look at a long period of time, take this concept which of economic freedom and decompose it into as many different policy areas as we can, obviously limited by data, but and try to kind of unpack how this factor of economic freedom through different channels potentially impacts entrepreneurial dynamics in order to give us a better understanding of what policymakers can kind of do to kind of provide an ecosystem, that's more favorable for entrepreneurship.
This is extremely interesting. And actually what we see how to frame probably ecosystem and how we can use such concepts and tools as the economic freedom index. My following question is how we can use these findings, how we can apply these findings that we learned from your study, and what will be your advices to policymakers, to practitioners that would be willing and interesting to implement the Freedom Economic Index in their region or context?
Yeah, so I think the practical contribution of the study is that it reveals to us more important information to policymakers than telling them promote economic freedom. Well, how do I do that, right? So it kind of tells us, gives us some insights on some of the aspects of economic freedom that are at the regional policymakers, hands to kind of try and toy with to get more economic freedom and what those potential outcomes are going to be. So with my study, I'm only able to, given data constraints, look at 9 different factors, but the ones that come out as kind of being strong determinants of kind of firm entry rates, which, if we want to get more startups, that's what we want to look at, are having lower property taxes would be consistent with economic freedom, but that's also highly positively associated with higher firm entry rates. That kind of makes sense. You lower the cost of entry, you allow people to keep more of the resources, then they're going to start more businesses. Also, I found a systematic relationship between cities that have lower minimum wages as encouraging more firm entry. And so I guess that's an important constraint, because if you're going to start a new business, you got to hire workers. And so, be able to not having like a high set wage may encourage you to kind of start a business and kind of hire more workers. And some of the things that we found, or that I found, that may be associated with more firm entry. So if policymakers want to provide an environment that's, doesn't cause a lot more firms to fail, if they want the firms to survive and grow. What I found was that having actually these findings are somewhat counterintuitive, because I actually found that having less redistribution, so transfers and subsidies, actually having less of that facilitates more firm entry. So having more transfers in place may actually provide a cushion for people to enter entrepreneurship, which is kind of consistent with the idea of having kind of a social net. And so maybe a lot of folks might think that is kind of counterintuitive, but there's economic arguments for why that's the case. Also found that cities that have a greater share of the private sector workforce that are unionized actually have greater firm exit rates. And so this may be related to kind of the cost of labor. Collective bargaining may drive up the wages, which may result in firms having to either shut down because they can't be sustainable, or maybe even kind of relocate to areas with, where the cost of labor are a little lower. So those are kind of some of the main takeaways that policymakers can kind of look at and examine their own kind of local policy mix and see what might make sense for them.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for sharing with us this perspective from the Economic Freedom Index. And I think it will be interesting also to test in the different contexts to see any differences. So thank you again for sharing this insight with us, and for our listeners and readers. So you can download the article from the website of Springer and Small Business Economics website. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.